This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Cass Midgley.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
I knew where this was going with my own faith. And when you've been involved in ministry and Christian faith for 20 years, you don't know what it's like to deconvert. I was scared. I was terrified because you have to say goodbye to the God you thought loved you. You have to say goodbye to the community that reinforced that value, that concept. It was an idea, a presuppositional idea, but an idea on top of which you built your mental framework and understanding of the world, and you fit all the pieces together, presupposing that that first belief was true.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 221 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. I'm going to die. A big thanks to each and every one of our Patreon and PayPal supporters. My guest today is Arael Avinu.
Arael Avinu with Fully Deconverted.
Arael is the founder of FullyDeconverted.com, a platform dedicated to disenfranchising dogma. Arael was involved in Christian ministry outreach for 20 years as a born-again evangelical. It was his exposure to academia and other cultures which caused him to begin critically analyzing what he believed and why. Arael deconverted from Christianity after realizing that its supernatural claims weren't evidently true. The vision of Fully Deconverted is to draw awareness to claims of incontrovertible issues with discourse and storytelling to demonstrate that there are no authorities on truth except for truth itself. Fully Deconverted adds value to the community by producing original content and hosting discussions on our most cherished values. Fully Deconverted and its team can be found on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and in a podcast. Before we get into my talk with Arael, Steve Birss, a regular listener of this podcast and a supporter, is in a band called Stars From Streetlights. And all 3 of the members of the band grew up in Christianity, and for different reasons and at different times, all walked away from Christianity. They write songs that explore their questions and doubts, and their latest release is called Heathen, which I'm going to feature here.
They say you'll feel lost once you've lost your way, but they're just afraid of what it means to be free of a hell that waits so patiently. What it means to be free when you don't believe.
Yet the wealthy folk use it as a way to make war. I used to hold on to the fact that the veil had been torn. Now I find peace in the fact that I failed to conform. I went from baptized to chastised. I kept it to myself I couldn't stand to see my dad cry. And when my friend needed treatment, I prayed to a God that I don't believe in. I'm decent, but I never was a deacon. Communion bread and grape juice, still I suck my teeth in. It's recent, I've been finally finding freedom. And if that makes me heathen, I guess I'm glad to be there. And if that makes me heathen, I guess I'm glad to be there.
What if we lived for today? What if we start searching for the only way? If this life that I'm giving, then you know I'm gonna live it. What if we live?
So that's the band Stars From Streetlights with my friend Steve Birss. Another member of the band wrote this about the song. Quote, Heathen was born out of the freedom that resulted from admitting our unbelief. It's a song about being honest with yourself, about the questions you have regarding your faith. We wanted to be focused on living for today instead of living for the afterlife. Embracing the here and now instead of fearing hell. Ultimately, it's a song about hope, grace, life, and freedom without God. Unquote. There's links to the song in the show notes, and thanks for Steve for sharing that with us. In the New Testament, in a book called Hebrews, there's a definition of faith. It's in chapter 11, verse 1, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? 1, 1, 1, 3 and 1. I'm just kidding, it's random. It goes like this, quote, Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see, unquote. Honestly, I think this is a powerful concept. Faith. Not in God, of course, but in things we know to be true, even when we can't see it at the moment. I say this because sometimes our brain plays tricks on us, especially those of us who have episodes of depression or anxiety or panic or delusion or insecurity or fear. Imagine being overwhelmed with fears and or a barrage of negative thoughts about one's self or one's circumstance or one's friend. When it comes to self, you hear the voice in your head saying, You're a failure. This mess is unsolvable. You're really bad at staying on top of your game. You kind of suck at figuring things out. Here you are again in this funk. What about this don't you understand, you idiot? Or everyone thinks you're annoying. All your friends are starting to lose respect for you. Or do you really have friends at all? Secretly, they think you are blank. These voices come from fear and insecurities, and when we're coming from a place of fear, self-pity, resentment, victimhood, insecurity, we're going to misconstrue our interactions with people or our circumstances. We're going to misread them. We're going to think they're one thing when in fact they're another. But we can't get to that other or the truth because we're blinded by the lies that we've chosen to believe. When we're coming from a place of fear and distrust and being guarded, People are going to say things to us, and we're going to hear something entirely different, maybe even the opposite. And in your mind, you're saying, oh, I know what you're thinking. After a while, it's like they're speaking German and you're speaking Spanish, and you're talking past each other, and no amount of raising your voices or repeating yourselves is going to break through the communication barrier. In fact, it makes it worse, escalates everyone's emotions, and someone invariably storms out of the room. When in fact, if any calm, civilized, mature audience would have seen what just happened, they would probably say, you're both saying the same things, maybe even in full agreement with each other. But because you're defensive and fearful, you've closed up.
Your lips move, but I can't hear what you're saying.
This is where I think faith comes in handy. Faith is being sure of what you hope for about that other person, and certain of what you do not see right now in that other person. For whatever reason, either you're guarded or feeling inferior, or you're scared or feeling small, or both, or all the above, you don't see them as your loving friend anymore, your spouse, your child, your kind coworker. And maybe they don't see you that way anymore. And there's this truth that's right in the room, and no one is seeing it, and bad things happen. I think this is on a macro scale with America and Russia, whatever, Cold War shit. It's happening on micro and macro levels, when in fact the truth is we're just humans, and we're fucking up, but we're trying, and we really do love each other, and we really do want the same things. But in this place of fear and panic and insecurity, we no longer believe in each other. We no longer believe in that dear, dear person sitting across the kitchen table from us, that they love us, that they only want good for us, and that they would take a bullet for us. Right now, in this moment of intensity and high blood pressure and strong words and loud voices, no, they can't be trusted. Part of saying yes to what is saying no to what isn't. If it isn't true, don't believe it. If it is, believe it, even if you can't see it right now.
We're humans.
We're complicated. We're never our best selves. That motherfucker doesn't exist. The sooner you put him or her to rest, the sooner you get on with your life. So, when we gather, shit happens, right? Things are said, if not in words, in passive-aggressive body language, smirks, facial expressions. If we have an idea in our head about what another person is thinking, we're going to see everything they do as a confirmation of that pre-existing bias. But if it's not true, then there's nothing they or you can do to get to the truth, or to get the truth to each other, or to let love break through or reality happen. And someone runs away mad, hurt, confused, and embarrassed. And none of it had to happen. It was all a lie. It's not true. I'm asking us to have faith in each other, goddammit. You know they're good people. Hell, 99% of the planet is good. And that's just because the 1% have something wrong with their brains. They'd be good too if something wasn't rubbing against that part of their brain that makes them want to fuck children or something. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Doubt? What doubt? The doubt that they're bad, or that they're against you in this moment. Doubt it. And in the end, you will benefit from listening to that doubt. Your brain is fucking with you. Your fears are fucking with you. Doubt them and believe what you can't see right now because you're enveloped in the fog of this destructive form of doubt, that they love you and are good people. Don't build a wall of protection between you and them. You're only building a prison for yourself, and you'll find yourself alone. The very thing you feared most is now happened because you listened to the very fear that you were trying to avoid. We truly have nothing to fear but fear itself. Conversely, we can have real conversations, true, where we actually listen and thus learn. I mean it, learn. I'm not always good at what I'm about to prescribe, but don't come to the conversation to teach. Come to learn. Seek first to understand, and second to be understood. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you've got it figured out. Doubt your certainty and actually listen. And I'm self-talking right now. What's more powerful, the person who's unafraid to be wrong or corrected, or the one who knows they're right? On the other hand, who's more powerful, the person who is confident in their hard-earned knowledge on the subject and thus doesn't have to yell or get excited or interrupt, or that other guy who yells, gets excited, and interrupts? Who's more powerful? Now, this is not to be confused with certainty, mind you. Hopefully, you've seen the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary. As one who debates and argues for a living all her life, she learned early on from her mother to never raise her voice or belittle her opponents, because it only reveals the weakness of her argument. Contrast that with Trump. You can see how scared he is, right? How insecure, how fragile. His narcissism is a defense mechanism for his small self-image. Now, let's acknowledge that his narcissism did what narcissism does. It elevated him to high places, the highest place on earth, in fact. That's how profound his narcissism is. But he lacks true power because his insecurities feed back into his narcissism, and thus he learns nothing, knows nothing, hears nothing, acknowledges nothing, zero humility, zero ability to doubt himself, which is what makes him so fucking dangerous. The lights are on, but no one's home. Contrasted that kind of narcissism with my guest today, Arael. This guy's belief in himself is powerful and contagious. He deconverted a year ago, and his internet presence through fullydeconverted.com has exploded and is already helping other deconverts. He's rubbing shoulders with some big names in the atheist community. He's building community. Honestly, I was pretty sure he was going to be arrogant. Maybe because of how alpha he is, or that he's got this red streak in his hair, or this perfectly groomed beard, or his voice sounds fantastic in a microphone, or just the fact that he's kind of exploded in a year and I've been doing this 4.5 and I'm jealous. But I doubted my presuppositions enough to have him on the show and hear him out. I'm not trying to boast, but I did open myself up. I was vulnerable, and you can hear both of us kind of thaw out as the show progresses. Once we get past walking around each other in a circle, smelling each other's asses, that's not a good description of what happened, but you get the picture. Two males trying to figure out who's cooler or smarter or whatever. You know, competition and comparison is the American way, but I say fuck that. I'm telling you, there's a lot about this country that looks macho that is absolutely rooted in fear, and it comes from Trump, it comes from anybody trying to hide under anything. The things that people wear, the things they drive, the teams they associate with, the guns they tote, all of this has the appearance of like badass and strong and powerful, but I'm telling you, it's weak. It's absolutely cowardice. Somebody who doesn't give a fuck about what they wear or what they drive or whether they have a gun on them or not, that's a powerful person, a fearless, powerful person. And they're unafraid to talk to people different from them. They're unafraid to be wrong. They're looking forward to being corrected. That's power. Fuck Trump and his fucking community that follows him like a fucking herd of cattle. Anyway, back to Arael. When we finished taping this conversation, we talked for another 30 minutes offline about this type of work, atheist work, deconversion work, podcasting, and such. And the tone set during the interview that crescendoed into both of us actually listening to each other and learning from each other, it was truly beautiful to me. I actually love this guy, and we could be friends if we were in the same town. And I get the impression that Arael had some pretty difficult circumstances to overcome growing up. He didn't talk about it much, but there was enough hinted there that you know. Everybody's got a fucking story, a fucking battle that they're fighting and have won and have lost, and here they find themselves, and we find them. Greeting them with judgment is bullshit. Greet them with faith. Faith that they're good. Faith that they're going to love you because you're lovable too. Everybody's fucking lovable with the right lenses on, right? It's not us expecting them to be lovable. It's about us being lovers of humanity and giving people the benefit of the doubt up front, having faith in humanity and in our inherent goodness. I know this sounds naive, and it probably is. I don't give a fuck. This is what I've always thought. Even when I was a Christian, I thought I would rather die loving than to live longer a fearful, insecure, paranoid baby. But Arael had some shit to overcome, like all of us, and here he has ascended to this great place, and it's a testimony to his belief in himself that I found to be counterbalanced healthily with a genuine humility and teachability that is truly admirable. There's several times in this talk where he says, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it that way. Who can say that is insecure? The insecure person says, yeah, I knew that already. So when it comes to narcissism, like all human attributes and even psychological disorders, there's a spectrum. And I think a healthy dose of narcissism, which has to be really small, but present, can be that thing that pushes you onto a stage that your insecurity has kept you off of. You can have faith in what is true. I don't like blowing smoke up our own asses, like telling yourself you're a good singer when you're not. So the goal of somebody trying to find themselves in their life and their love and their truth, they're going to have to apply some honesty where it's not necessarily there. That's a case where faith is stupid, like faith in God. Don't believe in something that's not there. Don't believe you're a good singer when you're not. But if you got some truth, if there's something to you that you know is true, and right now it ain't showing up, and right now there's people that doubt you or you doubt yourself, and you've got to believe it when nothing is evidentially pointing to it. That's faith. We obviously don't have faith in invisible friends anymore, but I think it's a powerful thing to have faith in yourself and your fellow human beings. That is, of course, until the evidence says they're not really trustworthy, after all. You know, Bill Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison this week as a serial fucking rapist. Dr. Huxtable, he was hiding something to keep up the facade or whatever. Fake people can't be trusted and thus are not worthy of our faith. But I'm prescribing brutal honesty here with yourself and with others. If all of us would take off our masks, our Dr. Huxtable masks, and just go fucking to the therapist and say, I have this crazy fantasy of wanting to fuck women who are passed out. I don't think it's very healthy. What do you think, Doc? You know, one of the things that's so paralyzing to getting healthy is having a problem with having a problem. Let's say that Dr. Huxtable, Bill Cosby, he's aware. He knows. He knows while he's fucking that woman. There's probably something not right about this. There's a voice in his head saying, I don't think so, Doc. Shouldn't be doing this. And the moment that he starts to listen to that, where he has a healthy doubt in this propensity to do this wrong thing, and he gives himself the benefit of the doubt, and he says, I need to talk to somebody about this. He goes to the door of that doctor. He's standing outside the threshold, about to knock or about to make that phone call, and he's embarrassed that he has this problem. You get that? He's embarrassed that he has a problem. He has a problem with having a problem, and the very person that's on the other end of the phone is literally trained to listen to your problems and knows already that the full spectrum of human fuck-ups is wide and long and deep and shitty. So get on in here, buddy. Join the human race. Everybody's fucked up. Now, that might sound contrary to my aspiration to have faith in the human race, but I'm asking you to have faith in that good part and a lot of doubt about that bad part and be honest. That's all. Fuck. I'd like to look at people, even when I go to Walmart or some place where there's strangers and start my relationship with them with faith, believing in their goodness, that they would love me if they knew me, and they probably would love themselves if they let themselves, that it's a safe place to be with them. Even when they're being a dick, you could probably talk them down, or maybe not, or die trying. I don't know, especially if he's carrying. But I think there's some skills here to know the difference when they're having a bad day or when there's truly a pattern and consistency to their toxicity like Cosby. And there's truly something for which I do need to throw up a boundary with this motherfucker and lose faith in them. They're not worthy of it. But even then, they're not a bad person. They're just mentally ill. And they need some help. I even feel that way about Trump. He's not a bad person. Even if he's the worst person I've ever seen in my life, he's mentally ill, and he needs to own it, resign, get some help, and I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. But on the whole, I want to be slow and reluctant to cast people as bad and bad for me, especially if I'm coming from a place of inferiority or insecurity or fear or resentment. Conversation on August 19th, 2018. The intro music is by Dave Weckl, called Just Groove Me. The segue music on this episode is an instrumental version of Heathen by Stars From Streetlights. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
What's going on, my friend?
Good morning. Good Sunday morning.
Yeah, good morning to you.
God is good. Normally it'd be a church greeting one another on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So is it Ariel?
It's Arael. Arael.
Arael. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should have learned that beforehand. I'll take that out.
Oh no, it's all cool.
Arael.
Close, yeah. Just think about "ah" sound twice. The sound that you got to make it the dentist, you know.
Yeah,
it's that "ah" sound. Arael.
Okay.
Or like think Egyptian god or something.
Arael.
Arael.
Wow, is that your birth name? Like your mom and dad gave you that?
That's a name I adopted later on in life after I realized I went through 2 or 3 fathers that weren't really my own. So I ended up changing my entire name.
Wow. Well, you've got a story. I can't wait to get into it. So what, I heard about you from James Xline.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, a guy, he was on the show and he was talking about fullyconverted.com. And so I went out there and I was like, wow, this is great. And it's so, I don't know. I deconverted maybe, process wise started 10 years ago, but it was probably, but in the meantime, I don't know. Is it just, when you buy a Jeep and then all of a sudden you see so many more Jeeps on the road? I don't know if it's something to where now that I'm deconverted, it seems like they're popping up everywhere or everybody's doing it. I mean, you get a vibe on like how much it's kind of on a steamroll. That's
how it was for me as well. Yeah. When I deconverted, I knew nothing about atheist culture or anything other than religious culture, really. And then here we all are.
Yeah, it was, actually whatever I did know about it, I was afraid of it, or I just saw it as dark and, scary. And what's funny is I know that you're friends with Aaron Ra and that you've done some work with him. And it's so funny because he literally personifies what I thought all atheists looked like.
Doesn't he?
Yeah. Anton LaVey or, some group of vampires or something.
Yeah. He's got this one outfit. I don't know if you've seen it, that I believe his wife got for him. And it's an outfit, with all the, I don't know what you call them, but it's got kind of like little pointy spikes on the shoulders and, some other stuff. He wore it one day at the atheist convention over in Oklahoma City, a few months ago.
Well, the last atheist convention or conference I went to that was Memphis, I think. It was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm from Oklahoma, so the fact that it was in Oklahoma City this year, I was wishing that I could go back because I live in Nashville now. And so let's get into your story. I'm curious as to like what's the religious context of your upbringing.
I deconverted a little less than a year ago, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
hit the ground
running. And previous to that was 20 years being a Christian, involved in most of that was involved in ministry in some form, whether it's being a part of small groups, hosting small groups, going on relief or missionary efforts. And probably the most notable one for that was the earthquake over off of Japan. I lived there at the time.
Wow.
And, the earthquake happened, and it caused damage to the Fukushima nuclear power plant, caused a tsunami that wiped out numerous coastal cities. So I went up there and I shot a documentary with Cadence Ministries. And we can talk more about that later if you want to. But I've been involved in various aspects of Christian ministry. What I ended with arriving at my deconversion was live production and as a resident videographer for a church local to where I am presently. I started making documentaries. I do commercial work also with film. Started making documentaries regarding what we believe in, why. It was a 3-part series. And at the end of that, I announced that I was no longer a believer.
So what were those 3 things? I mean, like you start going down the road and maybe it's the world of apologetics or something, and it's most often, or at least it does happen often, that when somebody investigates their own faith too deeply.
Yeah. So the first documentary was it's called Cognitive Bias. So I was recognizing at the time, we kind of just think or believe what we want to. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with just how we're brought up and how we're nurtured, what we surround ourselves with. And I was recognizing part of that. And I posed the documentary, at least in my mind, as kind of a question like, hey, is this what's going on with us? Because I was also a biblical and theological student. Mm-hmm. And I found that going through theology, there's a lot of unanswered questions, or to say that another way, a lot of presupposed beliefs.
Right.
So with my own religious community, I was just echoing these questions and theological dilemmas. Mm-hmm. And I found that I was starting to get shut down.
Scary. Don't go there.
Yeah. And to me, like this was not a point of contention. I wasn't trying to slap or punch my own people in the face. This was just me being a good theological student myself and taking my studies out to the community and getting public feedback. And it disturbed me. I'm like, wow, why is everybody pushing back on this? But I am that type. So in a previous career of mine, I was a criminal investigator. So you only do the facts. Yeah. You cannot progress an investigation on speculation alone or hearsay alone. It must start with probable cause. Then you investigate the facts, you form a case, and you send it off to the prosecutor's office.
Yeah. And you try to do your best to not presuppose who did it. I know what happened here. And because everything that happens from then on, you're going to use, because you've already got a construct and a frame, you're going to place those quote unquote facts that fit into your pre-existing bias, cognitive, bias. And that's what you're trying to avoid as an investigator, to be, subjective? No, objective.
Yeah. And I mean, but all that will be evident even in your report.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter how you write up your report. You have to say on approximately this date, on approximately this time, if you know it, this person was found dead. Autopsy reveals, et cetera, et cetera. It's Joe Friday.
Yeah. Okay? Just the facts, ma'am.
Just the facts. And then from there, the prosecutors get to determine how they're going to handle the case. And, if it goes to trial, the jurors are selected, and then they do their best from there to either, in some cases are open and shut. Some cases aren't. Mm-hmm. But you can recognize from the report what is clear and what isn't.
And all this rigor is so that the judge and jury can get as close as possible to the right answer, to the truth. And so here you are as a Christian, and you're saying, hey, Jesus is the truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life, and he's a big boy, and he can handle all the scrutiny the world could ever bring against him because he's the truth. So what are we afraid of here?
Yeah, that was my attitude. That was my approach. And I was getting turned off because, you hear the criticisms about Christianity, even within Christianity. So that's nothing new to Christians, unless you live a severely sheltered life, exposed to only one denomination. I expected that because I was getting that in the university as well. I was getting some pushback on some of my academic reports, even from professors, because I would state plainly, hey, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. How did we make this leap?
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah.
And that was all fun. It was a little frustrating, but it was also fun because you now feel like you're trailblazing in your own faith, something which people outside of academia never even touch on.
Yeah.
So I was going through that, and I created this documentary called Cognitive Bias because I strongly suspected a lot of what we believed and a lot of how we behaved as a Christian culture was based off of things like promises that were just made to us.
Yeah.
You're promised to go to heaven if you do what we ask of you. You promise to go to hell if you don't. And I did not like that proposition. Now, I didn't come right out and say that, it was just, and I probably wouldn't have even been able to articulate it at that time. But that, as a filmmaker and as someone who was trained to observe the facts, I was just creating that as a question. Now, my second documentary, I interviewed a local religious community leader and a local LGBT community leader to try to specifically attack an issue or shed light on an issue that involved them both. And of course, the issue there is, why has historically the religious community rejected those outside of its own dogma? It was a great interview with both parties. And that documentary was called Emergence.
Okay.
And I titled it Emergence because a lot of our social behavior is emergent. It comes from social constructs that we build on. It's not something that's handed down to us, say, from a God. It's something that if we take an objective, observational look at where we came from and how it is that we came to believe, in other words, what we believe and why, it's always coming from something before us, not something ahead of us. And if you want to use that just as figuratively, something below us, something that we're building on, not something that's being given from above. Now, that's just evidently true. Today, a lot of your churches, at least in evangelical America, will adopt LGBT persons into their congregation. They will let them come in, whereas historically, this has not been the case.
Right.
And, most conservative will still reject that. But, the people, the new age, the people that are making money now, the people that are opening the doors and realizing, hey, with cultural change, we have to change as well. All right. So that documentary was called Emergence. At the end of that, though, when I taped the very last part, it was already a few months into this project series. And I realized through my academic studies, through 20 years of ministry, through being shut down by my own community, even though kind of behind closed doors, they kind of supported the conversation in some regards, but in other regards, they're like, hey, we don't like that you're investigating. We don't like that you're posing questions rather than assertions of faith is what the climate was. I knew where this was going with my own faith. So, and this is a few months time in between each one.
Okay. So near the end of the second one, you're feeling that, that your faith is slipping, your doubts are going to take over.
Yeah. I strongly suspected that I was about to just walk over that edge. And I went ahead and recorded that confession, that I was no longer a believer. And to be honest with you, I wasn't even sure where I was.
Yeah.
When you've been involved in ministry and Christian faith for 20 years, you don't know what it's like to deconvert.
No. Were you scared?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was scared. I was terrified because,
yeah.
I mean, just imagine your own family looks at you and says, hey son, we've enjoyed your whole life with us and our life with you. But it turns out, you're adopted and, and you're finding this out at 30 years old, and, oh, by the way, we can't be your family anymore. Since you realize the truth now, it's time for you to move on. It's been good, Sort of.
Now, wait, I'm confused. You using that as a metaphor, or did that literally happen?
No, that I'm using that scenario metaphorically there because what happens when you deconvert from your religion is you have to say goodbye to the God you thought loved you.
Yeah.
You have to say goodbye to the community that reinforced that value, that concept.
Right. Yeah, I've had a guy on the show before. He said it's not like just realizing that Santa Claus doesn't exist. It's like realizing my mother never existed.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's a big deal.
That has added value to you your whole life. It was an idea, a presuppositional idea, but an idea.
Yeah.
On top of which you built your mental framework and understanding of the world, and you fit all the pieces together, presupposing that first belief was true.
Well, were you indoctrinated as a child?
Wouldn't say that I was indoctrinated as a child. I knew of Christianity. I said the salvation prayer at 9 passionately, and then again at 13.
Okay, but those are young enough years. It's not necessarily the formative years, but they're young enough to where if that's where your basis starts, and then the next, like you said, next 20 years is built on that foundation, and then the foundation crumbles, it's horrifying.
Yeah. And it's something that I thought was worth pursuing. So I have that personality already to invest myself.
You think? I was just noticing, like, you don't do anything half-assed. I mean, to be a deconvert 1 year ago, and you already have a website and videography going, and you don't sit still for long.
No, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't. It's that part of my personality. And another part of my personality is I'm okay with addressing the elephants in the room. That's why when I was becoming skeptical of how we arrived at some of our beliefs, as a believer myself, I thought it was okay to talk about this.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay to just have the open debate. And, the pastor of the church that I was involved with at that time, he and I are, close in age. We've worked out together in the gym. Yeah. We've done things. I interviewed all the converts coming into his church and did bios on them, like with videography and everything. I was there. I was invested in that church, and people knew me. I knew him and all that stuff. And, we would be on Facebook sometimes just talking. And then he would just like delete all his comments. Because now my assumption, he didn't tell me why he deleted. He did. But it was vague, and because you don't want to tell anybody, hey, I absolutely regret what I did, and I look like a jerk. You're not going to say that because, you have to be pious. But
was he covering his tracks?
Yeah, that's what it is, right? When we delete our things from a public forum, we're having an open, honest, transparent discussion about our most cherished values.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got an image to uphold. He's got a tithing income to keep.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And if it looks like the public conversation of the whole congregation is fixed on the issue of skepticism, all of a sudden, where's your fear going to go? Your fear is going to go to your own quality of life if that's the thing that may be in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. Regardless of suspicions of why those were deleted, the fact is when we do delete something, that means we're trying to hide something. That means we do not hold transparency in a high regard, especially if we were transparent in the first place and we went back and covered it up. So things like that were happening. And, my personality type is there's no reason for this.
Mm-hmm. So in your involvement with churches, did you ever get pulled aside by the pastor or maybe a boardroom full of elders and kind of get your hand slapped that you're moving too fast or you're intimidating us?
Sort of with the last church because, I was kind of a public figure there. I would be on stage, I would host, I would conduct interviews, I would do all the video stuff, all the video interviews.
Well, the reason I ask is I can just suspect that, in a church, they're going to feel the need to rein you in.
Yeah, that's definitely what happened in the last one. All the ones before that, I was a happy follower. I wasn't very vocal.
You weren't rocking the boat.
I was a college student, young,
Yeah.
Didn't really see a need to, because I wasn't challenging my own faith at that time.
Yeah. Just going along, going with the flow.
Yeah. And I was passionate about it.
So before you taped the third video or produce it, you've already taped your confession, and you just kind of got it in the can, and not sure if you're going to release it or not.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I did one of those suspenseful things where I cut it off right there, like, hey, I have a confession to make. And then as a storyteller, I cut it right there, and I went back to some interviews that I was doing in New York.
Oh,
I cut it with this lady, and I asked her, so Cass, so sometimes when we're talking about, hey, isn't it cool to be our authentic self? And everybody's gonna be like, yeah, 100% support that. We should be our authentic self.
Yeah.
And, and that's the only honorable way to go throughout life. We shouldn't hide and wear masks.
Yeah.
Except, Cass, I was interviewing this one lady in New York in Times Square, and she was the one person that said, no, you shouldn't always reveal your authentic self to persons. So I cut my confession, and I cut right to that. It's about 30 seconds at the end of that documentary, so my audience could hear why they didn't just hear my confession. And she says, sometimes you got to be able to consider your audience. I'm paraphrasing her.
Yeah.
You got to be able to consider your audience, because sometimes they're not ready to hear that.
Yeah. That's kind of Jesus's don't cast your pearls before swine.
Oh, I hear that all the time. So I left that documentary there. I taped it, and my world was upside down with anxiety for a few months before I produced and aired my third documentary called Reshaping Reality, where I interviewed a minister turned atheist.
What was his name?
His name was Brandon Long. He lives in around the DC area.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up there. We filmed a documentary up there. I included my story in that. That documentary opens where the last one leaves off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with my confession. And I come right out and say it. There's no beating around the bush. The whole documentary punches you right in your face. And that's when my community learned, because they didn't know yet. That's when my community learned, hey, the guy that's been doing all our conversion interviews into Christianity and baptism videos and church highlights and all this stuff, he's a non-believer. And he just aired a documentary with a Christian minister turned atheist. I mean, I just flipped it on everybody and did a 180. Of course, I do that as a storyteller and a filmmaker. Go big or go home.
Yeah.
But the more subtle and nuanced part of that maybe people didn't realize, was how absolutely nerve-wracking that was for me.
Yeah, because this isn't, unlike those other videos and ways and means in which you do things, this isn't theatrics. This is real happening in real time. Like, this is captured on tape. Almost like, if somebody's filming the sky and then a shooting star happens to go by. Here you are taping something with one intent, only to capture something entirely different on tape.
Yeah. And it was great to air it. It was also nerve-wracking. It's like one of those things, I've spent a lot of time with the LGBT community because I do a lot of activism and producing with them.
Mm-hmm.
And their coming out stories are, if you were just to take the LGBT element out of it, it is exact cast. It's exactly like ours. Someone who deconverts from religion. If you were just to take those specific elements out and hear their stories, what it makes them feel like, how their audience reacts to them, like their families, their friends, peers, loved ones, their romantic partners, it's exactly the same.
Yeah,
they are exactly the same.
The reaction might be because most homophobes think it's a choice for those people to choose their orientation, and in a way, there's as much confusion around, especially just I hate to say non-thinkers, but somebody who hadn't actually thought it through. There's a similar confusion around whether somebody chooses their faith or not, chooses their beliefs. And I think what kind of going back to the way you were describing the word emergent is that we don't get to choose. I mean, stuff is presented to us, like you said, comes up into us, in front of us, and from below us, and is presented to us. And because we're not robotic, or that we're not just a zombie, we have to have a cognitive reaction to that. We're going to form, and so our beliefs, our faith, are that which we believe is true, or that's I'm just saying it's not a choice. And that I think the judgment that people feel afforded to do, both to gays and to deconverts is afforded to them because they think you're a bad person because you're choosing this.
Right.
Whereas if they could let you off the hook if they'd realize that you're just being. You're just showing up, and here I am, and I'd like for you to accept me. But no, you're not going to do that because you have some kind of preconceived notion that I'm evil for choosing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are the product of all the information that we have and our ability to make sense of it and to accept that information and reject that information after we've kind of processed it and decided kind of where we're going to go in life. But it's in an informed status rather than, hey, something is just true and we're automatically predisposed to believing in a God. Don't you know? You look at the universe and see that it exists, therefore God. You know, they've been taught to make that leap without realizing they were taught to make the leap.
Isn't that interesting? That's something that they're taught, but intrinsic into what they're taught is not to think. I mean, authority comes from the scriptures. You know, this is the Bible says it, so it's true. I've even heard, and maybe if I were to get honest and go back into my own memory, I think there was places in my life where if I ran into something that was a cognitive dissonance because of my faith, I would err on the side of the Bible. So even like if the evolution or something comes along and it's like, no, or the Bible says this, I'm gonna go with that. And so it's a way of burying my head in the sand. And that's a guy like you is not able or willing to do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, not for very long. It will eat me up alive if I feel like, hey, there's a problem
That's
here.
right. Good point. Not for very long.
We can work our way through it.
Yeah.
But why doesn't everybody want to do it? That stuff eats me alive.
Okay, well, let's talk about that because there is one way. There's two kinds of pain here. There's the pain that is like either necessary or unnecessary. I've heard somebody talk about this recently. So for you and I, we don't have a high pain threshold for unnecessary pain. Mm-hmm. So if we figure out that this is something that we can get out of, then we will. And then what I mean by that is the person who comes to a crossroads, a person of faith, and they say, okay, this is what facts are telling me, and this is what the Bible's telling me. And so they look at the path of honesty and integrity, or, just acknowledging the facts and changing accordingly. Yeah. As scary, just like you and I did when we, the thought of it was scary. But then when they turn to that other fork in the road and they see staying safe and warm in the hot tub of faith, in the safety and numbers of everybody else who believes, and don't bother me with the facts, that seems less painful to them. Whereas to you and I, when we turned back to going back into the warm, soft safety of self-delusion, we saw more pain there than we did on the other side. That's all.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because we kind of seen over the hill. We've seen the grass on the other side, if even just by sight. And for everybody to proclaim, you know what? Sure, there might be something over there, but why don't we just stay here? Isn't this the best you could ever hope for?
Right.
And we're saying, no. I may not have experiences on the other side of this hill, but I have at least peered over the top of it.
Yeah.
And I've seen something there. How are you content for only your experiences in life to just stay here because somebody before you met here and they told you to stay here?
Okay, Arael, I've got a question for you. In your life, you've known people who are risk averse, right?
Afraid of risk. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, they're not risk takers. You got all kinds of personalities out there. You got people that are just risk takers. In fact, sometimes for some people, it's the adrenaline rush of taking a risk. Sometimes breaking into somebody's house at night while they're at home isn't about the TV that you're going to walk out with. It's about the adrenaline, For some people, I'm just saying, that's somebody who loves risk, and then you have somebody who's I won't get on an airplane because of the odds that I'm going to die, right? Even though they're astronomically low. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I think there's a connection between people who stay in the faith and or even just enjoy grand narratives that superimpose over their life and make everything make sense and simple and take away the chaotic randomness of this weird, uncontrolled universe. That, you know, it has a lot to do with how afraid they are of risk. And so what I hear you saying is when you say over that hill, you're like, that's the adventurer.
Mm.
I don't know. Just a study in personality test, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. Yeah. Okay. So to characterize it another way, and I follow you, to characterize it another way is when you look over the hill, you know, sure, it might be risky. It might not be. Who knows? But when you look over the hill, you're seeing that it appears like there's something that benefits us.
Mm-hmm.
But we're believing something false. So you have this choice to make in that moment.
Yeah.
You can go on that adventure, which doesn't appear that it's going to kill you, but you can go on the adventure and you can, quote, risk finding something that at least by appearance looks like it will actually benefit you and the rest of humanity. And by this, we're talking about science. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the things that we can observe. Mm-hmm. We're talking about when we actually go on that adventure, we have now learned more and are able to contribute more to the human experience in total.
Mm.
But you're promised a penalty if you do so by the group that is telling you, no, stay here. So if you're kind of aware of the actual dynamics that is going on there, hey, it looks great over there, but these people are saying, I'll be punished if I do go over there. The person who realizes what's going on will have an epiphany.
Yeah.
And the epiphany is that you are being manipulated. And we're not even talking about, you know, the persons who are affecting the manipulation. They're acting as a mechanism. It's the system that they're already in, that they're just echoing its values. And, you know, and that's also something that's emergent. You know, I don't think there's too many preachers on stage that you and I can go locally right now and yell at them, hey, you're just lying to everybody. No. I think they believe it too, of course.
Yeah, there's no malice.
I believed it. You know, you may have believed it. All of us that may have deconverted sincerely believed it.
Yeah.
It's just some of us find ourselves in leadership roles and some of us don't find ourselves there.
Yeah.
The only problem is if you take a honest, transparent reflection on yourself, your role, the group you're involved in, the trajectory that you're on, how you're affecting the groups that you're bumping into, and what that means for humanity in whole, you now have a better idea of the value that you add. And if you have that in mind and in sight, when you look outside yourself, outside your own group and over that hill, and you say, wow, there's something there that could add to this whole kind of spectrum, but for no evidentiary reason, your group says, oh, we've heard about people that talk like the way you're talking right now.
Yeah.
You are a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Oh,
you better stop that right now.
Yeah.
You better not go over there.
Yeah.
But what happens once you do, Cass? When
you
do,
you can't unlearn it.
They have a label for you now.
Apostate.
It's called apostate.
Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest lies in Christian culture.
Well, sure.
And this is why they preach against knowledge, the ones who do, and advocate for faith, which, as you and I might know and understand, that's a phrase which replaces a word, delusion. It flips it on its head.
Yeah. Well, and I know you're familiar with the, you know, the what is it, The Village by M. Night Shyamalan, you know, or something where don't go outside, don't go in the forest, there's monsters in there. And that's how and I know historically, you know, that religion was used to control people, but like you said about, we could go, you know, to the church down the street and we're going to find that local pastor to be really naive, really. I mean, he is not trying to control people, at least on the forefront of his mind. I think there are some televangelists who are charlatans, and they don't believe a bit of it, but it's the way they get rich. But the typical guy down the street, no. Yeah. And I think the grace that I had to give myself, because are you familiar with like the hero's journey? What's the guy's name?
No, not outside of film.
Joseph Campbell, I guess. He did a study on different mythologies and and archetypes. And there's this theme in all stories, or at least, the main stories, of a person getting kicked out of the village and forced out to do, to find their own way.
Yeah.
And it's the hero's journey. But the cool thing about what I hear you saying, because obviously you have an internal compass or a drive for the truth, for higher, for better, for happier, for more fun. You're not a bump on a log. You're on a mission, and most people are. I mean, various degrees. Yeah. And so when we landed, here you are, a 9-year-old kid. You go to a church. You hear the pastor say, "You know what? There's a God in heaven who has a plan for your life. He loves you, and he wants the best for you, and he knows that you're struggling with sin, and he can get inside you and empower you to overcome sin. You can love your mother and father. You can empty the trash like a good boy. God is going to feel you." I mean, not even getting to the afterlife stuff. And so what idiot wouldn't walk the aisle and say yes to that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So you take that journey on and you pursue it, and you become a student of the Word. You begin to read and study. You go to conferences. You engage with people. You iron sharpen iron in community, and next thing you know, you're a better person, and all this is working. And then, but the thing is that we are not static, and definitely you're not, and we're not dormant. We're a river, and we're going to keep running, and you never stepped in the same one twice, and so let's keep going. And then you run into some holes. Big holes in the Bible, big holes in stuff that Jesus said. "I came not to bring peace, but a sword." What the fuck? Unless you hate your mother and father, we start running into stuff. And instead of doing what it seems like, your last church was nervous about, instead of putting your head back in the sand and saying, I'm going to have to trust that Jesus knew what he was talking about with that sword stuff. And you're like, no, I think that, why do we have to check our brains at the door? Why do I have to get a lobotomy in order to stay a good Christian? What if my hero's journey is still going and I'm actually going to go past Christianity? And that's actually, we know, and we're not just patting ourselves on the back. We know that's a virtue. That's a sign of our own goodness, not settling for something that's less than, I said during my deconversion, I said, I'll never bow the knee to a God who's not at least as good as I am.
Yeah.
So your hero's journeys continue. That's all.
Yeah. Man, let me tell you, when I did come out, I had anxiety for a good 2 weeks. I felt like my life had turned upside down, but I knew going into that, and this is why I created a group and a brand called Fully Deconverted, is I didn't have anybody to walk with me on that journey. Yeah. And it absolutely felt like I was walking over a hill that I've never been. Everybody told me not to go, but I felt like they were the ones lying to themselves, because that's where all the indicators point, right? When they say we don't value knowledge, we only value faith and belief. We value that which isn't evidently true. For someone who came from a criminal investigative background, that's nonsense. But I couldn't stop it any longer. I couldn't stop the delusion being the delusion in my mind. And I had to go on that journey. I had to go to the other side. And once you step over that hill, that is your declaration of, I no longer subscribe to the Hebrews version of faith. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
If God is real, then it doesn't take us to explain that away. And I realized, wow, I can either keep going on this journey because I value truth and I value that which I can know, and it was very clear, Cass. It was so clear. And I think a lot of people turn back at this point. I can keep my community, the people I'm already familiar with, and that which I was raised in or knew for 20 years, 30 years, and some people 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
And keep that security blanket and keep up the handshakes, the hugs, high fives, my social status, for some people, their economic status, or I can satisfy my desire for that which is evidently true.
Yeah.
Even if it destroys my life. Like, who wants to love a lie? Nobody wants to love a lie. You don't want to believe your wife has been cheating on you for 20 years. So some people will reject investigating such things as that.
Yeah.
Some people will reject just investigating where all the evidence actually points, because it brings them to a harsh reality.
Yeah.
but for those who actually want to know the truth so that they can actually improve their lives in a way that reflects what they believe about themselves intrinsically, they will take that step, as hard as it is to take.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I created Fully Deconverted as kind of a rebuttal against the culture that I came from.
Yeah. Well, and just like when you deconverted, you found yourself alone. You didn't have anybody to, mentor you through that. And maybe to some degree, your organization there is providing resources for people so that they're not alone on their journey.
Yeah. And we've received numerous stories about that, both privately, on our Facebook discussion group pages.
Yeah.
And I love hearing their stories.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, because they felt like they could say it.
Yeah.
And number two, because they say that the group has helped them. You know, just being able to talk about it or hear other people talk about it or see them talk about it. Three, there are people who come from not the same religious background as you and I may have come from. They may have come from a much more oppressive, abusive, or, something where you might start throwing out the term Stockholm syndrome, where you start having affections for your abusers. People who have been kidnapped or, that sort of thing, unlawfully imprisoned, and that there's a dynamic that changes where you start loving your oppressor.
Yeah.
And just to see people's stories of having came from that, and you see, wait a minute, they just painted the same picture of the circumstances in which I'm existing presently. And that allows them to re-identify all the characters in their own story. Wait a minute. The person that I love is actually the person who is abusing me. The society in which I exist actually dehumanizes me because of the fact that I'm a woman. My pursuits, my biological and cognitive instincts are being suppressed because my society around me says it's not okay to walk this way. And they're able to re-identify in the group because they see other people's stories. They're able to have discussions, or they're just able to read. And that's what I did along my deconversion is I started seeing other people's stories.
Yeah. I'm moved by the power of the human spirit in the survival. I know this is part of it's our evolutionary, genes, is that the will to survive. And so, like it or not, and all virtue or judgment aside, we are selfish, and we damn well should be. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. I mean, that degree of selfishness. And so what that does is that drives us. And, you were talking about going over the hill and then the option to people turn around and look back, and some go back. And that's a huge cog disc for me, because we know there's no going back because you can't unlearn what's over the hill. You've seen it. It's not a mystery anymore. Now it's right before your eyes, and it's there. Yeah. And to go back, and this is what I don't know if you're familiar with like Science Mike of the podcast, The Liturgist. He deconverted and then went back. That doesn't make any sense to me unless I kind of go back to that very survival drive that took one person over the hill. Somehow, in this case, Science Mike saw that the benefits of going back exceeded the benefits of continuing over the hill. And again, it's still him acting on survival, selfish instinct. What gets weird, and I know that's kind of what you were just talking about, is when we see people doing things and believing in things that are clearly not in their best interest.
Right.
That's what gets weird. We're like, okay, you're supposed to be instinctively survival, looking out for yourself. And, so when somebody is doing something that is diminishing you, get the fuck out. Like, what the fuck is keeping you there? That's just weird. What are you doing? Yeah. But somehow the narrative that they've embraced has spun it so that, no, this is for my good. And it's pretty twisted.
Yeah, it is. And I get some of that. I mean, I thought about that nonstop along my deconversion process. I'm like, you have, in one hand, you have everything you love or have known to love. And on the other hand, you have the great abyss. You have the darkness. You have the blackness. You have the chaos. You don't know what's going to be there. You just know that on your inside, that's where you want to go. Yeah. Because where you came from isn't a place of sure refuge. It's simply a house of cards built with lies.
Yeah.
But you love those lies.
That's so true.
Yeah, you love those people. So I get it. I get people, peering over the hill and deciding, you know what, I better not.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. And I especially get it. I fantasize about this. I haven't done a lot of interviews with people like this, but I imagine for people much older than myself, I'm 32 today. There are much older people.
Wait. Today's your birthday?
Today is my birthday.
Well,
Cass.
happy birthday.
Thank you. my
I'm
friend.
honored that you would spend an hour of it with me. It's crazy. What are you going to do tonight? Are you going to party, or what do you do for your birthday?
I think I'm going to share a cake with my boys, with a romantic interest of mine, and her daughter, and she dropped off donuts this morning without even bothering me. She knew you and I were going to be talking, so she dropped these off. So I'm very she's the best.
Okay, well, you know what? We've made this jump from the cerebral to the personal, and I think maybe. Well, just one last thing. Also, when you said I was nervous for 2 weeks about coming out. I just want to say, as a comfort or as a acknowledgement to some of my listeners who have been waiting 2 years and are still too nervous to come out.
Yeah.
They're looking at your 2 weeks as shut up, as far as how hard it is for some people. And you're obviously a risk taker. So I'm just saying that relatively that 2 weeks was nothing compared to some of our listeners and the people that are in the midst of the struggle. I'm not trying to diminish it. I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah. Well, there's some people on the fully deconverted team that are not completely out yet.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the team. Cause I mean, like I started this show 4 years ago. I'm on episode 200 and something and, of weekly shows. And I don't have a staff. I just have me. I mean, how did you build an empire in 1 year? Or maybe it's not an empire, but
I didn't. I did it in a few months. When I launched Fully Deconverted, it was just a Facebook page.
Yeah.
And then people just came on and I got to know them a little bit, did some private messaging, just you do that the quick vetting process and you just find out where people's visions are aligning. And
so are you able to make does this thing generate income?
No. We are not income generating. We are completely 100% volunteers. We have, we do things that are different, but yeah, as far as generating income and stuff like that, no, we're not there yet. We're just a few months in.
So what do you do for a living?
Filmmaking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's your gig. And so you do your own projects or do you hire out or what's?
I produce commercially for local organizations or private parties where I live.
Which is where?
Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, cool. That's kind of close to DC, right?
All my other efforts are invested in activism.
Okay, for LGBT you mentioned. What else?
Yeah, LGBT. Yeah, and then what I meant by activism specifically is like what you and I are doing now. Okay. I do activism with them, but that's commercial activism, so I kind of separate that.
Sure. Yeah, and the quote unquote atheist movement. Like I got totally swept up into the Four Horsemen, Hitchens. God damn, he changed my life. I mean, I just felt, his book and my story with God is not great is that before I had deconverted, maybe a year or two before I started to get honest, I was with a friend at a Barnes and Noble. And his book had just come out, and so there was this kiosk with like 100 copies of, 20 copies of it facing out. And this guy that I was with, who was kind of a fearless, person, just walked up, started flipping through it, and then he looks over at me and he goes, "Hey, look at this!" And I literally got like chills and some kind of just anxiety, and turned and went the other way. Because he just said on the cover of a book, "God is not great." Well, you're talking about my best friend there, buddy, Yeah. And within a year, I was reading it and fell in love with it.
Yeah, right. Hey, so I didn't know anything about the atheist community at my deconversion.
Yeah.
So I had heard of Christopher Hitchens. I've heard of a few people. If you would have asked me who they were, I wouldn't have been able to rename them until after I was deconverted.
Right, me neither.
But I've seen more of his stuff now. I've tried to see what our community is like, right?
Yeah.
So I know at least a few names now.
Yeah. Well, and where I was go ahead.
Before that though, like I remember that I had seen Christopher Hitchens. I remember thinking as a Christian, like, what's wrong with these guys? What's wrong with these idiots? Like what are you so angry about?
Oh,
Why
isn't
are you
that the line? That is the
trying
line.
to destroy this great value system that humanity has privileged to us as specially and divinely revealed by a deity. And here you are, such an idiot, slapping it just right in its face and throwing it in the trash can like it has no value. Like what's but then after I deconverted, and just to paint the picture, I still had no idea what I was getting into, but I had luck chance of somebody recommending and introducing me to Aaron Ra.
Uh-huh.
And so I scheduled an interview with him. And I had already filmed Reshaping Reality, but I had not aired it yet by the time Aaron Ra and I interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of like, Aaron Ra was my first in-person experience with anything atheist.
Wow. I mean, you just go straight to the top.
I guess so, yeah. And then he, when we were hanging out and did the interview, he invited me to go to the American Atheist Conference, which was going to be like a month or two later.
Mm-hmm.
I aired Reshaping Reality. The next week was the conference. I went to that, and that was my first experience with the atheist community.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I do on this show, and what I've learned from just various listeners, is that you got some people who that kind of activism is just, they love it. It gets in their blood, and they feel like they're making the world a better place. They're stretching people's capacity to think outside boxes and such. Then you have others that are like, don't bother me with all this activism stuff. I just want to watch TV or whatever. They're not as engaging or energized. They would call me or an activist or something like, you're spastic, calm the fuck down, chill out. Nobody knows or cares about whether there's a God or not,
Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you got that. And then there is a uniqueness to the ex-Christian community, or at least the deconverted community. Mm. And that is, Hitchens never drank the Kool-Aid. Sam Harris was never in love with Jesus. Richard Dawkins, actually Richard did have a little bit of experience with his childhood Catholicism, I think, or something. But in general, they didn't have their mother and father tell them they're adopted. I mean, they have never had their heart broken by God.
Yeah.
And so it really is kind of logical for them. Now, when they do get pissed, when Hitchens got pissed, it was because theocracy was encroaching. Like, you keep your shit to yourself. And once 9/11 happened, that's when all those books came out, because it's like, whoa, buddy. Faith is making people do some extremely stupid things, and it's starting to affect me. So we're going to have to push back this encroaching theocracy. So there's that involvement. Anyway, what I'm saying is that my experience with the deconverted community is that they don't relate to the quote unquote atheist movement so much. They like going to an atheist conference is not really that's not what they're into. And I just want to give space for everybody to be themselves and nobody to look at the other and say, my way of expressing my atheism is superior to yours. It's just, we're different. We're different.
Yeah, that's an interesting remark of yours. I might not have as much experience with speaking with those who are specifically deconverted and those who are just never drank the Kool-Aid, but are involved in the atheist movement. I've never gauged that demographic. It's interesting that you say that. I would have never have even thought that. Mm-hmm. Probably because most of the conversations I have are with former theists, and they seem quite passionate to me.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that. In fact, that's actually extremely normal, is for them to come out of the gate angry.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But I'm talking about people that they're over their angry phase, and
you were speaking specifically to activism, is that right?
Yeah, they just don't. They're not. And there's even some pushback. I mean, I think you probably you probably caught wind of some of Sam Harris's controversy these days. Like he's gone from being, just this knight in shining armor and leading the movement or whatever, and now there's some pushback as to maybe there's some leftover misogyny inside him that he's got blind spots about, or I don't know. I don't keep up with it that much. But here again, that's kind of my point, is that there's a lot to keep up with, and some people are just saying, I'm out.
Yeah. I think if I was to reflect on myself, and I don't know that much about Sam Harris. I got one of his books, I've been in shallow water with everybody. I've not really gone too deep into any one person's content, but, to talk about myself, when I speak with the American atheists and I hear them talk about their organization and how they're politically, what their political agenda is, I find that I'm not passionate there. Mm-hmm. I find that I am passionate about conversations, yes. And that probably comes from my entire adult career and the things that I've done. But I am passionate about making sure that people have a voice and that they aren't being abused, and also telling stories that are worth telling, hence, the filmmaking. Yeah. That's what I'm passionate about. Like when I start hearing about political movements, hey, we're going to do a march and we're going to do all this stuff, my mind immediately goes, is there a story there? That's where my mind goes. I go to marketing. I go to, is there a story there? I go to, how much emotional impact can we spin on this? Yeah. Or is this just politics, bureaucracy and all that sort of thing? Because I got to be honest with you, that has no appeal to me.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the difference in the hard sciences and the soft sciences, or math and chemistry versus fiction, or fiction versus nonfiction. And I think it's
about what it feels like. Yeah.
Is you want to get on the human side, on the real side, the experiential, even to borrow another word, spiritual, the spiritual side. It's not just, there's got to be something vibrant, to it. And as opposed to just legislation or whatever. Yeah. So you mentioned you got, what did you say, 3 boys?
I do. Yeah. 3 sons.
What ages?
12, 11, and a 6-year-old that's about to be 7.
Cool. And, so do you have any kind of college degrees?
I am an undergrad in theology and biblical studies. So at the time of deconverting, I was halfway through my senior year. And I just couldn't go anymore after that. Yeah.
There again, once you look under the hood, it's not as pretty as you thought. What about what do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, I skateboard. I was just skateboarding this morning.
No way.
Yeah, and
how long you been doing that?
When did on the headphones, you play some chill music, and you skateboard, and it's like you're high.
Yeah.
You just skate down the street. I live in a downtown area, so I love being surrounded by the energy, and I love existing in my own bubble right in the middle of that bubble, and just like devil may care, like nothing bothers me.
Like the eye of the storm.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all going on around you, but you got your earbuds on and you're in your own little world.
Yeah.
Now, is that a coastal city that you're in? I don't know much about Virginia.
It pretty much is. So Norfolk is a little bit more inland. If you drive, just down the interstate, you're at Virginia Beach.
Okay. But I guess what I was imagining is you're skateboarding, on the coast, but it's more urban.
Yeah, we have the water right here, but it's the Bay Area.
Okay.
The real ocean front is Virginia Beach. So we're, depending on what part of the ocean you want to touch, it's either a 10-minute drive or, a walk down to the street here because the water comes all the way in.
Yeah.
Or if you want to go to the beach with the big waves, that's Virginia Beach, and that's about 15, 20 minutes down the interstate.
Cool. Well, actually, I want to go back one step with theology before I forget. When you deconverted and you came out, what was the reaction of like your parents? Did you have siblings?
So my brother, I don't think was ever a believer.
Okay.
He kind of always seemed naturally resistant to it. So when, and he knew me to be like a Bible thumping Christian. Mm-hmm. His eyes were kind of like, when I told him, and I was very frank up front and very kind of clear on the issue. And when I told him, I could just kind of see he was astounded. Mm-hmm. Like,
how did you go from Bible thumping, like last time I knew you?
Yeah.
Because, we're both adults now, we're in our 30s, to you just said everything. And that's the way I've been living my life.
Yeah.
So, I enjoyed seeing his reaction, and I guess I didn't anticipate it in that moment. I'm like, yeah, man, like, would have never thought about it, but here we are together.
Yeah. But he's delighted though, right?
Yeah. He was delighted in that shocked, stunned phase.
Well, and I just asked about your parents, but I remember that you said earlier that you've had many fathers, and so there's probably, it's mostly your mom.
Well, my mother, when I came out to her, she's one of those cultural believers. I come from a lower socioeconomic background. And so she's, I'm just going to say she's a simple person, but she believes, like if you were to ask her, she would say, I believe in God, I'm going to heaven. And I'm going to heaven because I believe in God.
Right.
I told her, and I gave her my elevator pitch about why I deconverted. And it was all kind of in one conversation. And I was concerned there, but I'm a grown adult, and I realize, things are just way more important to me than what people think about me.
Yeah.
So I was just hoping for something good, and it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
She was quiet. She listened. She accepted it, and she hasn't preached at me. She's not a preaching type.
Yeah. So there in Virginia or Norfolk, you have a community of other deconverters. Do you guys get together at all, like for meetups?
I don't have what you would call a deconverted community here. Most of my friends and everybody here is still a part of the religious community. And most, as you can imagine, I don't really affiliate with anymore.
Yeah, no.
But there are some who are still, open and professing and church-going Christians who were my friends before, who are still my friends, especially one or two persons who I hang out with regularly.
Yeah, well, good on them. That's mature of them.
Yeah, some people can somehow assess, hey, some things are worth destroying relationships over, and some things are worth evaluating properly.
Yeah.
According to what dissonance we may feel regarding these values, and adjusting like that. So it's been a mix.
Yeah. Well put. It's not a deal breaker. And priorities, just people are more important than things, and being right is not necessarily as important as remaining friends.
Yeah, you're right. Which is probably why some people stop drinking the Kool-Aid and then go back to drinking the Kool-Aid, because relationships are meaningful. Arguably, relationships are the most valuable thing we'll ever experience. So I get it on both sides.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Relationships. So I'm jumping around here, but I'm curious. This morning when you were skateboarding and you kind of had this high moment, do you remember any of the songs that were on at the time?
Oh yeah. So I have a couple of my go-to artists where I just zone out. Damian Rice. Do you know the artist Damian Rice?
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, Damian Rice is definitely one of my takes me to a different place. The XX.
I got into the XX for a while, but it wore on me. I just felt like every song sounded alike, and I kind of backed off.
It kind of does. Yeah, it kind of does. And I have a lot of memories attached to some of these songs.
Oh yeah, so. They're associated with memorable, significant moments in our lives. They trigger us.
Yeah, so I can definitely have, some moments of ecstasy when I'm listening to some of these songs just in my own headspace, doing something like skateboarding, which essentially feels like flying down a street. Mm-hmm. And, and it just, all those things combined, creates that kind of high, ecstasy moment.
Yeah, sure. What about, again, other than skateboarding, you got any hobbies? Are you a cook? Or are you a collector of anything?
What else do I really do? That is about it, man.
Okay.
Filmmaking and skateboarding, hanging out with my boys, and all my boys skateboard as well, by the way.
Oh, I bet they do. You're not going to let that go without sharing with them.
Yeah, my boys and I skateboard, hang out with friends when I can. Activism takes up a lot of my time, between that and doing any kind of commercial work. I have, your leftover energies is either you want to downtime, especially if you're creative, you need to downtime and kind of reset your energies. Mm-hmm.
and or go to your outlets where you can kind of let your stress go. And for me, that's skateboarding or hanging out with my sons, going to the beach, and just doing normal stuff, like not activism, not religion. You're not stressing out. You're not having existential angst. You just leave all that stuff behind, and you just say to yourself, man, I really appreciate this moment right here.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really healthy.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's, whereas for you it's skateboarding, for me, it's a gin and tonic.
Yeah. I enjoy the occasional evening drink with friends and release that way as well. Yeah. And karaoke.
No way.
Karaoke parties.
Oh, that's great. What's some of your go-to songs?
Man, I'm all over the place. The fun ones that I like doing, especially with other friends who like to have fun with it as well, is, ridiculous things like Meatloaf. You might think Meatloaf, but those are fun songs to sing.
Oh, I can definitely see that. That would be fun. Bat Out of Hell or something.
Yeah. And maybe some sweeter songs like the Aladdin song, A Whole New World.
Yeah. I just got a vision of you saying, sleep on it, baby, won't you sleep on it?
Yeah. See, Meatloaf.
Oh yeah. I'm 52. So he was big when I was in high school. So.
Oh yeah. And then other than that, it's just all over the place with karaoke.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra is kind of, and Elvis Presley, I can hit those a little bit better than I can. Like Bruno Mars, I'll never sing that. I can't do Bruno Mars.
No way. Nobody can do that. That's out there.
Exactly.
So one last question, just as far as like, what's some of the most exotic places that your videography have taken you to geographically?
Well, I've done most of it now in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just name a few places. I've been, Seattle, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Now, what do you think? How long were you in New Orleans?
I've been there off and on. Last time I was there was for a weekend trip.
Well, being somebody who's intuitive and looks for the story, what do you think of the vibe of that city? That city has a personality, does it not?
You're exactly right. Yeah. So there's, for anybody that's never been there, depending on what way you enter New Orleans, you can go on this bridge or a few bridges or whatever.
Pontchartrain.
And, there's a distinct divide from, before the bridge and after the bridge and actually enter into New Orleans. It has its own culture. It has its own vibe. If you really wanted to think about it, it's different from the rest of the United States, all in one little area.
Yeah.
And I love New Orleans. Never lived there, but I enjoy going there.
Yeah, me too. I have some family down there that I've visited off and on over the years, and it's just, I don't know. I like it when inanimate objects have, take on, because of the human beings within it and the human beings that built it and all that's gone on, over time, that something emerges like a personality that is unique, and I just think that's cool as shit.
Yeah. Of course, when you go there, people might think of Mardi Gras when they hear New Orleans.
Yeah.
I've never been there during Mardi Gras, but if you go to the French Quarter, it's nonstop shop after shop of everything that you would think of associated with New Orleans, like all the masks, and those are great.
Yeah.
The artwork, my favorite artwork is in the French Quarter of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
It's really expensive. I can't buy it, but it's my favorite art.
Yeah.
Associated with one place, with one local culture.
Yeah.
Other places I've been is DC, New York City, Oklahoma City, Dallas. And that's local stuff. Japan, I did that documentary with the tsunami and earthquake in Fukushima.
Well, that had to be significant because that was a big deal, and they're still recovering from that, aren't they?
Oh, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. You have boats on top of, 7-story buildings.
Yeah.
You have it's exactly like your movies today, your Armageddon movies today where, you have all this CG and you just look at a whole city and it's just torn apart in all these wondrous ways. That was what I was looking at when I was in Japan.
And you were there when it happened?
I was there when it happened. Yeah. I felt the earthquake.
God dang.
Where I was living at was a place called Yokosuka. So that was about a 5-hour drive. And if driving in Japan is different than driving in the States. If you were in the States and you measured the same distance from where I was at to get to where I was going to be in the heart of it all, it would have only taken you maybe 2, maybe 3 hours. But in Japan, it takes you like 5 or 6. And then, we went up north several times to deliver aid because, just cities. Cities were gone.
Yeah.
And all that was left was rubble. And people trying to go back, the people who were able to flee, they were going back and trying to uncover their loved ones. Of course, most of that is gone. Like it's chaos.
And did you catch some of this on film?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I did a 40-minute documentary there. Yeah.
What's that called?
That was called Sendai, and I forgot what my subtitle was. That was about 7 years ago. Sendai something.
Yeah.
And we used that documentary to raise about $50,000 worth of funding so that we could continue doing relief efforts. And people that partnered with us as a result of that was things like Samaritan's Purse. And these are like Christian relief effort organizations.
Yeah, I know about them.
Maybe a couple other people that contributed.
Is that video? Is there someplace I can see that video?
There's not. I don't even think I might be able to go on an old hard drive and.
Well, no, I just meant like Netflix or something. No.
But I know the people that were using that, they would have. They may still have that.
Well, what's you got a YouTube site?
Yeah, so Fully Deconverted can be found if you go to fullydeconverted.com. We have all our social links up at the top. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We have a page where we do our publishings for Facebook, and we also have a group, which is a discussion group of persons of faith and non-faith.
Mm-hmm. But some of the videos that you have posted there, are there things that could serve as an encouragement to people in their deconversion process, or what do you got? What do you got there?
Okay, so on fullydeconverted.com, we have a page called Learn page. So anybody can go on there. That's obvious. It's going to be a lot of our secular writings where we're plugging other persons of non-faith, people who contribute to the activist realm. So they can go there and they can just look at material. Mm-hmm. I would recommend the best place to go, though, is our Facebook group, because we have persons of faith there from all kinds of different backgrounds, of all kinds of status. And we have people who came from faith and are now atheists, or, we just have everybody in there. And it's a very active group, and it has a high quality of engagement. And I'm a member of about 80 groups on Facebook. Mm-hmm. The Fully Deconverted Facebook group, I'm going to say without bias, is the best group I know of on Facebook for it being open to everybody. Mm-hmm. But it's private. It's a closed group, so nobody can see. You have to be a member. I just want to put that out there for discussion.
How many people's in that group?
Right now, we're about at 400. We're just under 400, I think.
Yeah. Well, I have a similar group, and I'm obviously not in competition or offended by your boast, because I love it when these groups find themselves, when they find each other, because it's so organic. I had no idea that communities would form around this podcast.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
And they hear an episode and they related to that person so much that they contacted them, and then, or like they hooked up on Facebook. And then finally, it wasn't until I'd been on the air for 2 years before I saw that Life After God with Ryan Bell, who's a friend, had started a private Facebook group. And I thought, okay, well, let's do this. Well, it ends up just being a private chat room almost, but it's, I have just never seen a community of strangers, mind you, be so kind, loving, compassionate, understanding, encouraging, uplifting. And it's going on as we speak. And there's about 250 in that group. And sometimes I just sit back and watch. And in fact, have you ever thought about like having a retreat or a weekend somewhere where people can fly in and hang out?
The moderators and the staff and I have discussed that. So it's definitely something we're interested in. Yeah. And we might put something out like that in the future after we get over kind of a big project we're working on right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do one in October, the first one. And
nice.
We're meeting in like the Smokies of East Tennessee.
Oh, what a great place. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those lodges that's like 3 stories high. And because of bunk beds and all kinds of things, it sleeps 40.
That's great. That is amazing. I would love to go to that myself, actually.
Right? It sounds fun. There's a hot tub. There's actually an indoor pool. There's arcade. There's just like this crazy fun house. And one of my favorite movies of all time was this movie called The Big Chill. And it's a bunch of people that went to high school or college together. Then they grew up and they went off and had careers. And then in their mid 40s, I think one of them dies. And so they all get together for the funeral, which I think the word big chill is like death. I don't know. It's a metaphor for death. But anyway, so they all, instead of getting hotel rooms or something, they all get and they meet in one house and they live for that entire week or weekend together. Yeah. And so you see conversations at the kitchen table at night, at early morning, out on a walk through the woods, fucking life happening and conversation happening. So it's one of my favorite movies. And so my idea of a fun retreat is a lodge in the woods, with just places to hang. You can take a walk, go on a bike ride, just connect with people in the most honest and human way, which I think is so much more accessible outside of religion and all the fakery and maskery of it. These are just real people.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I've really enjoyed meeting you. I think you're amazing, and I know that we have overcomer after overcomer every week on this show, but I can tell in you. And here's the thing about life is that we get put here, we gestate in our mother's womb, we get spit out, we find ourselves in the care of 2 people we didn't know or ask to be cared for by. Yeah. We get handed these genes, this color hair, this sense of humor, this intellect, and we're off to the races, and it's wind them up and set them down and see what happens. And I can already tell just in 1 hour of talking to you that you're one of those that came out of the, just came out running and charging and invigorated to take life by the balls. And it just is so evident. And normally that kind of person is an arrogant asshole. And because they've just fuck everybody. I can do this on my own or whatever. And yet I've totally experienced the opposite in you, that you are humble and that you're connected. You're not, you don't come across as feeling superior to, I just really, I came in with some I don't know how this is going to go, because you're so intelligent. For one thing, I've watched enough interviews with you that it was like, oh shit, this guy's IQ is off the chart. As far as just how fast you think and how fast you articulate. So I thought he probably thinks he's hot shit. So I was kind of intimidated. But honestly,
no need.
I know, right? Well, you're so warm and you're so honest. And honestly, you listened as much as you talked today. And I just commend you seem like a great guy, and I hope that your work there thrives.
Man, I really appreciate it, Cass. Hey, you're the first show I've been on.
Okay.
I 100% appreciate that.
Oh, well, I'm honored, man. I think you got a good thing going there. And for some reason, you draw a crowd and things are rolling, and you've only been out a year. What the fuck? I'm telling you, you have an energy to you that is impressive. And so I wish you the best. And thanks for coming on.
I really appreciate it, Cass. Thanks for having me.
So that's my talk with Arael. Good guy, right? Doing good in the world. He's not idle. For sure, he's not slothful, is he? He's up and at 'em, doing things. Powerful, actually. Again, his organization can be found at fullydeconverted.com. My thanks to James Exline for introducing us. If you would like to share your story on this podcast, contact me at midgley.cass@gmail.com. That's midgley.cass@gmail.com. Also, if you're a faithful listener of this podcast and it's made a difference in your life and you'd like to be in the private support group of Facebook, also contact me. 2, if you'd like to come to our weekend retreat in the Smokies, in a couple of weeks, October 12th through the 14th. Contact me, and we'll work out those details. We've got a few spaces open. It's going to be fun. All right. Good talk. See you out there. Love you guys. Peace out.
What if we live